For more than 1,000 years, there was an empire in the heart of Europe that refused to die. It survived crusades and plagues. It watched kingdoms rise and fall, borders shift, languages change. Popes crowned its rulers, philosophers mocked them. Voltaire famously sneered that it was neither holy, nor Roman, nor an empire. And yet, somehow, it endured, until one summer day in 1806, when the last Holy Roman Emperor quietly signed a document, laid down his crown, and erased a 1,000-year-old empire with a few strokes of a pen. There was no final glorious battle, no burning capital, no great invasion to mark its end. Just silence. Tonight, we're going to ask a simple question with a very complicated answer. Why did the Holy Roman Empire fall? And to understand that, we have to watch it slowly come apart from the inside. Before we watch it fall, we need to understand what fell. When we hear the word empire, we often imagine Rome or the Ottomans, a solid block of color on a map, ruled from a single shining capital. The Holy Roman Empire was nothing like that. By the 1700s, it was a patchwork of hundreds of states. Some were powerful kingdoms like Prussia and Bavaria. Others were tiny bishoprics and city-states you could cross on horseback in an afternoon. Dukes, bishops, abbots, free cities, all jostled for power beneath the distant authority of a man who called himself emperor. From the outside, it looked like chaos. From the inside, it was a complex negotiated order held together by rituals, oaths, and a shared idea that there was still such a thing as a single Christian empire in Central Europe. The emperor did not rule like a French king or a Russian czar. He bargained, he persuaded, he begged. Year after year, he had to win over princes, bishops, and city councils with new privileges, new exemptions, and new promises. Every treaty that kept the peace, every compromise that avoided war, also chipped away at his authority. Over the centuries, that constant bargaining slowly hollowed out the very idea of imperial power. The Holy Roman Empire did not fall because of one bad emperor or one lost war. It fell because, piece by piece, its rulers traded real authority for short-term survival. The story begins long before the name Holy Roman Empire was even used. In the year 800, on Christmas Day, the Frankish king Charlemagne knelt in St. Peter's in Rome. Pope Leo III placed a crown on his head and proclaimed him Emperor of the Romans. For a brief moment, it looked as if the Western Roman Empire had been reborn. But Charlemagne's realm fractured after his death. Grandsons quarreled, borders split, unity faded. Out of its ruins in the 10th century, the German king Otto I revived the imperial title, this time rooted in the German lands, with deep ties to the Church and a mission to defend Latin Christendom. Over time, this realm would come to be known as the Holy Roman Empire. It had no single capital like Paris or London. The emperor moved from court to court, from diet to diet, constantly negotiating with princes, bishops, and city councils. This traveling, consensus-based monarchy worked when emperors were strong, charismatic, and successful in war. But it had a hidden cost. Every time an emperor granted privileges to secure support, a little more power leaked away from the center.
Every defeated rebellion, every bought alliance, meant more rights written into law for local lords. The very flexibility that let the empire survive so many crises also made it fragile. The seeds of the empire's future weakness were planted in the way it was built.
By the late Middle Ages, the real struggle inside the empire was not between emperor and foreign enemies, but between the emperor and his own princes. Emperors needed money, soldiers, and votes. Princes wanted autonomy, rights, and legal guarantees that the crown could not simply sweep them aside. In 1356, Emperor Charles IV issued a document called the Golden Bull. On paper, it was a brilliant compromise. It set clear rules for electing the emperor, naming 7 great princes, 3 archbishops, and 4 secular rulers as prince-electors. In reality, it was a surrender. The emperor's throne now depended entirely on a handful of powerful families. To win their support, candidates promised more freedoms, more lands, more exemptions. Election after election, the monarchy paid for its survival by selling pieces of its own authority. The empire became less a state and more a permanent bargaining table. Imperial laws existed, but enforcing them meant convincing the very princes who benefited from ignoring them. When foreign powers looked in, from France, Spain, or later Prussia, they saw opportunity. A place where they could buy allies, back factions, and slowly turn the emperor's noble subjects into almost independent players. The crown still shone brightly, but underneath, its foundations were quietly crumbling.
If politics loosened the empire's bolts, religion took a hammer to them. In 1517, a German monk named Martin Luther nailed his theses to a church door in Wittenberg. His protest against indulgences grew into a wider revolt against the authority of the Pope, and soon against the religious unity of the Holy Roman Empire itself. Some princes clung to Catholicism. Others embraced Lutheranism or later Calvinism, not just out of conviction, but out of opportunity. A Protestant prince could seize church lands, control local bishops, and present himself as both political and spiritual leader of his people. The emperor, now from the powerful Habsburg dynasty, saw religious division as a mortal threat. But when he tried to enforce unity, he ran into the same old problem. He did not have enough loyal troops, money, or obedient princes to make his will reality. Wars flared, leagues formed, coalitions shifted. Treaties like the Peace of Augsburg in 1555 patched things up, with the principle cuius regio eius religio. The ruler decides the religion of his land. It kept the peace, but it also admitted a dangerous truth: that the empire was now a collection of competing confessional states, not a single Christian commonwealth. The Holy Roman Emperor, once imagined as guardian of a united Christendom, was now just one more player in a crowded, divided religious landscape.
In 1618, a small rebellion in Bohemia lit a fire that nearly burned the empire to ash. The 30 Years' War began as a dispute over royal succession and religious rights. It became a continent-wide catastrophe. Imperial armies, Protestant coalitions, Swedish and French troops, Mercenaries with loyalty only to coin, all marched, burned, and looted across German lands. Whole regions lost a third, sometimes half of their population. Villages were wiped from the map. Fields stood empty, churches abandoned. Famine and disease killed more than gunpowder. For ordinary people, the Holy Roman Empire was no longer an abstract idea. It was the name on the uniforms of men who might protect you one month and strip your village bare the next. When the war finally ended in 1648 with the Peace of Westphalia, it did more than stop the killing. It rewrote the empire's operating system. Princes gained formal, legal sovereignty over their territories. They could make their own alliances, sign their own treaties, as long as they did not openly attack the emperor. On paper, the Holy Roman Empire survived. In practice, Westphalia turned it into a loose association of quasi-independent states, with the emperor reduced to first among not quite equals. The trauma of the war froze many rulers into caution. They wanted peace above all, even if it meant slowly suffocating the old idea of a single empire. After Westphalia, two powers began to loom over the rest of the empire. Both technically loyal members, both quietly outgrowing the system that had created them. To the south and east stood the Habsburg monarchy, Austria, Bohemia, Hungary, and more. The Habsburg emperors increasingly focused on defending their own sprawling dynastic lands against the Ottomans and rival great powers, rather than on governing the fractured empire as a whole. To the north rose Prussia, a small, hard, militarized state. It turned discipline into a weapon and bureaucracy into a machine. Its rulers drilled their armies relentlessly, built efficient tax systems, and began to think of themselves less as just another imperial prince, and more as leaders of a rising power in their own right. Smaller states watched this duel with growing unease. When crisis came, should they obey the emperor or side with whichever great power seemed more useful? The Holy Roman Empire was becoming a stage on which other powers performed. The imperial title still glittered, but the real decisions about war and peace were increasingly made in Vienna, Berlin, Paris, and London, not in any imperial council. The empire existed, but more and more, it existed in the shadow of the states inside it.
While emperors and princes argued, thinkers, writers, and ordinary people were quietly inventing something new, the idea of Germany. For centuries, loyalty had flowed upward to a prince, a bishop, a city, or the distant emperor. In the 18th century, as Enlightenment ideas spread, poets and philosophers began to speak of a shared language, a shared culture, a German nation trapped inside a decaying imperial shell. At the same time, reformers looked with envy at states like Britain or France, which could raise taxes and armies efficiently through centralized institutions. In the empire, every reform ran into the same wall: the rights of the estates, the jealousies of the princes, the sacred weight of old privileges. The old Holy Roman Empire had once been praised as a shield protecting small states and local freedoms. By the late 1700s, more and more voices were asking, was it now a prison, blocking the creation of a strong, unified, modern state in the German lands? The old dream of a universal Christian empire was fading. In its place stood a new question, not who will be emperor, but what should Germany be? That question hung in the air as a storm gathered to the west.
In 1789, the French Revolution exploded. Its shockwaves did not stop at the Rhine. Revolutionary France declared war not just on kings, but on the entire old order of Europe, including the Holy Roman Empire. Imperial territory along the Rhine was invaded, occupied, and annexed. Ancient bishoprics were dissolved. Free cities lost their independence. The French redrew borders with the ruthlessness the empire's own institutions could never have managed. Inside the empire, some rulers were horrified. Others quietly admired the administrative efficiency of the new French state. Many simply tried to survive by cutting deals, trading lands and titles as the map was redrawn. The emperor, now Francis II, faced a brutal reality. He could not defend the empire's western frontiers without the cooperation of princes who increasingly thought first about their own survival. The revolution had exposed a hard truth. In a world of mass armies and centralized power, a half-feudal, half-negotiated empire was dangerously out of date. The Holy Roman Empire could not match the speed, reach, and brutality of a modern revolutionary state.
Then came the man who would deliver the final blow, Napoleon Bonaparte. In 1804, he crowned himself Emperor of the French, a direct challenge to the old imperial idea. To secure his position, he needed a loyal buffer of German states between France and the remaining great powers. Step by step, Napoleon pulled German princes out of the Holy Roman orbit and into his own. In 1806, he created the Confederation of the Rhine, a new alliance of German states under French protection. Membership required them to leave the empire. Many did so eagerly, trading their old status as imperial estates for the promise of security and prestige in Napoleon's system. Others had little choice. With every defection, the Holy Roman Empire became more of a title than a reality. When Napoleon defeated Austria at Austerlitz, it was clear that the Habsburg Emperor could no longer claim to be the secular head of Christian Europe. The question was no longer if the empire would end, but how and on whose terms.
On 6 August 1806, Emperor Francis II issued a formal declaration. He laid down the crown of the Holy Roman Empire, released all princes and subjects from their oaths, and announced that the empire was dissolved. There was no dramatic ceremony, no last speech in a crowded hall. Just a document sent out to courts and chanceries, and the 1,000-year-old institution slipped into history. Francis kept a different title, Emperor of Austria.
Other German states drifted between French control and later new alliances. In the 19th century, Prussia would forge a new German empire, one built on iron and nationalism, not on medieval charters. So why did the Holy Roman Empire fall? Not because it was conquered in a single campaign, but because over centuries its flexibility turned into weakness. The very system that once balanced emperor, princes, and cities could not survive the age of centralized nation-states and total war. Yet its shadow lingers. Whenever we talk about a Europe of regions, about shared institutions and negotiated sovereignty, we are in some ways still living with questions the Holy Roman Empire struggled with until its final day. An empire that died quietly, after a very long time of slowly falling apart.
History isn't just dates and names. It's blood, ambition, betrayal, and glory. It's the story of empires that rose from nothing and fell into dust. And every single one of them has something to teach us. If you want to keep diving into these cinematic tales of power and legacy, subscribe to Empires Untold. We release new history documentaries every week, exploring the battles, rulers, and civilizations that textbooks barely mention. But here's the truth. Channels like this only survive with your support. Every like tells the algorithm to push these stories further. Every comment helps build a community of history lovers like you. Every share brings someone new into the story. And if you want to go even deeper and help us create more advanced, more detailed documentaries, you can support the channel through Buy Me a Coffee. The link is waiting for you in the description. If you believe the past deserves to be remembered, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, and join us on this journey. Together, we'll make sure these empires stay untold no more.